Welcome to the End Zone. Let's move the chains and talk about the College Football National Championship between Alabama and Ohio State. So listen, I'd originally tried to create a different video about this, and I was just getting bogged down in all the statistics. And a lot of times what we do when we try to analyze games or we try to really figure out what's going on, we come in with a preconceived notion and then we use stats to back it up. We don't look at the stats first or watch the games and see how they actually play out, then form an opinion. And I found myself doing that. And I think a lot of people do. I see it with my friends whenever we're talking college football or NFL football. Everybody's so focused on the stats that they forget about the matchups. They forget about the key parts of the game. They forget about what happened the last time these two teams played in the college football playoffs. So that's what I want to talk about here. I want to talk about the matchups, the way these two teams play each other, and what I think is going to happen. And I'll be upfront with you. I think that Alabama is going to win this game because I think that this Alabama team is one of the greatest college football teams of all time. They can beat you in so many different ways, first of all, and the playmakers that they have, it's just incredible. And especially if Jalen Waddle, he's a game time decision at the time that I'm making this video, if Jalen Waddle plays, I don't see a way that this Ohio State secondary and Shaun Wade can come up with a way to really stop this team. And in football, and you hear Urban Meyer talk about this all the time on Fox's college football show, when you're playing a team like Alabama or just any high-powered offense, you have to at least stop them 4 to 5 times. And with all these playmakers, with Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Devonta Smith, and you add Jalen Waddle, possibly Mechie's solid, Forstall at tight end, I just don't see Ohio State having enough firepower, but I still think they can win the game. I'm not saying it'll be a blowout. I think it could be close. I actually think it could be like a 38 to 35 type of score here. But I'm saying the matchup, when you just look at it, when you look at the way these two teams play, Alabama matches up pretty well, in my opinion. So let's talk about what I think Ohio State kind of has to do here to neutralize and defeat Alabama. So it all starts, to me, everybody's talking about Justin Fields. While he's an important player, Chris Olave, I think that Trey Sermon is going to be the guy that this Ohio State team is going to have to lean on in that offensive line. And an Alabama defense that may not be like the Alabama defense we talk about in years past, but they're still pretty good. And I think it's going to be harder to pass on this Alabama defense, especially because, like we saw at the Notre Dame game, Patrick Surtain is a guy who is so much of a playmaker that Notre Dame only throws to him once during the game. They only target his side of the field once. And when you're on defense and when you have a player like Surtain, who's the best secondary player in college football, who can totally shut down a portion of the field, then you're already winning in the matchup. And for me, I think that is huge. Chris Olave and company, these Ohio State wide receivers are talented, but are they talented enough to break through and get these chunk plays and possibly get some chunk touchdowns? I think they could at least get 1 or 2, but Surtain is going to have to play lights out. And I wouldn't expect Ohio State to target his side of the field as much. If they do challenge him, trust me, I would love to see that. But when you talk about Trey Sermon's been playing lights out, probably one of, if not the best, you could argue, college football running backs late in the season. He totally has jumped in on the scene and been dominant. I mean, he's been incredible what he's been able to do, especially against Clemson. I think that Ohio State is going to have to control the ball, control the clock, something we saw Notre Dame actually come out with a game plan to do. Unfortunately, their offense they don't have enough to be sustainable, but Ohio State does. If Trey Sermon can run the ball consistently, if Ohio State can control the clock and keep Alabama's offense off the field, then they're forcing Alabama to be in a position where Alabama, each possession becomes more and more important, and you're putting pressure on that offense. You're putting pressure on Mac Jones, because if Ohio State, I believe, they can stop them more than 5 times, then Ohio State can win this game. And it's not necessarily on Ohio State's defense. I think it's all on Trey Sermon. Can Trey Sermon run the ball? Can Ohio State control the line of scrimmage, get away from the Alabama defenders, and keep the ball out of Mac Jones, Najee Harris, and Devontae Smith's hands, and possibly Jalen Waddle, again, as I mentioned, if he plays. But I think that is the key matchup we're going to talk about here because I mean, these Alabama wide receivers, listen, they're going to score points. I do worry about Najee Harris because this Ohio State D-line and D-ends especially, they're coached by some of the best defensive coaches in college football in Ohio State. They consistently produce players into the NFL draft every year. If you know me, I know Joey Bosa. I've talked to him about the level of Ohio State coaching on the defensive line, that it's top tier, second to none. And we saw this against Notre Dame. Alabama running the ball. If you take away that one incredible hurdle by Najee Harris, the numbers weren't as great as you would expect. Also, Notre Dame was kind of able to do some good things in the secondary, forcing Mac Jones to check down the ball. I think Ohio State's going to try and do that, but it all comes down on defense. Ohio State's going to have to get pressure. For me, it's just their two most important players in this game, Alabama. Surtain, he cuts off a half of the field, basically. He's that good. Teams are afraid to target him. And then Devonta Smith, the Heisman winner. The thing about Devonta Smith is he doesn't necessarily need to get catches. He doesn't need to get touches, which he will. What happens is, and what we saw in the Notre Dame game, is he opened up plays. This all-star safety for Notre Dame, Kyle Hamilton, multiple times had to put all of his attention on Devonta Smith, leaving guys wide open, leaving tight ends open for touchdowns. We saw it happen against Notre Dame. And for me, when you just have players like that, players who may not necessarily need to touch the ball to have an impact on the game, like Devonta Smith and like Patrick Surtain, I cannot pick Ohio State to win this game just because I think Alabama is too loaded. But I think that if Ohio State does win this game, it will be because of Trey Sermon in the trenches, getting it done and keeping Alabama's offense on the field, keeping the ball away from Patrick Surtain. And I think, Justin Fields, he's going to have to be a playmaker. We saw it against Clemson. How healthy is he going to be? A core injury. I know you can't see my chest here, but for a quarterback, you got to believe there's a lot that affects your throwing motion when your core is injured because it's a very important part of your body to drive the ball downfield, to float it up, and especially to run. How is it going to affect his run game? Is he going to be scared to run the ball after taking hits from Skalski in the Clemson game? We'll see. I'm curious to see that. But I'd love to know your opinions down below. I think that Alabama is probably going to win 38-35. I think that's kind of where I'm guessing. But I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama was able to run away with it. Maybe even like 42-28 or something like that. Just because this Alabama offense is so high-powered, they can do so much. And while the defense isn't what it used to be for Alabama, they have a playmaker in Patrick Surtain who can totally shut down a portion of the field. And that in itself makes him one of the better players in college football. I'd love to know your opinions down below. Alabama or Ohio State? Thanks for watching the EndZone. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment so we can move the chains.